our great debate. Dr. Dean Edell is obviously one of the premier doctors. I've admired him for many, many years. I listen to his advice. I think he is phenomenally gifted. I think he looks at life in a way that I want to emulate, and I agree with him on virtually everything, except when it comes to circumcision. Circumcision. This is where he and I differ. Good morning, Dean.
Good morning. You butter me up. The subject is penises, and then you have me on the show. I got it.
Well, let's start talking first about the study, the HIV study.
Yes.
There is a huge difference between circumcision in developing countries like Africa and in the United States. First of all, were you impressed at all with the study?
Well, basically, no, and no one else in the world was either. The problem is that circumcision in Africa and here is different. Circumcision is mostly done on Muslims. They are entirely different cultures. And now we're going to send a team in, okay, to line men up and chop off half their schwanzes to cure a disease that can be stopped with, responsible behavior and condoms, if the church would let us use condoms. And other countries, in Uganda, for instance, we've greatly reduced the AIDS transmission rate with other methods. It's kind of interesting, I think, that this is a possible solution. I mean, this is expensive. We haven't followed these men to know what happens. Do you have a newly cut penis? I mean, is your sex the same? Are you a Muslim? Are you? Yeah, exactly. It may be. I'm willing to admit there may be diseases or conditions of the foreskin that you will avoid by removing it. If you remove breast tissue, a lot of women, by the way, are fighting today, you're not going to get breast cancer.
But hang on a minute, okay? Let's talk about penile cancer.
Okay, first of all, penis cancer. It's a funny thing because in Europe, I mean, where they do not circumcise, in Asia where they don't circumcise, and throughout most of the world. And as you know, if all these things were true, why is there not one single medical organization in the entire world, except maybe the Israeli medical organization, that recommends routine male infant circumcision? Not one. And the other thing that's very interesting that you'd never hear when you talk to, quote, doctors about this is, what about the other side? What is the function? If I said remove the breasts of young girls to prevent breast cancer, everybody, oh, no, we need breasts, right? And if I suggested, and there's 2 studies where female circumcision reduces urinary tract infection and diseases of the vulva. I mean, vulvar cancer is very important cancer in women. Why don't we, if I recommended removing circumcising girls for this, everybody would be in an uproar. But the most important question of all, you never hear, what is the function of the foreskin? Why is it there? What does it do? What are we doing to men when we remove it? And then all of a sudden you get the rapt attention. Now you and I, it's too late, okay? If you take a foreskin off of an adult male, you are talking, hang on, this is average, 15 square inches of sexual tissue that does all kinds of things. Probably we'd lose our license if you and I started talking here the reality.
15 square inches of tissue on a foreskin?
Yeah, not you, Bill.
I don't have 15 square inches of the whole area doesn't have 15 square inches. So,
well, if you take a cylinder, you take the diameter, and you do the math and fold it out both sides flat on a table. It's 14 or 15 square inches, and they're very important sexual nerve endings. If I asked you where the most sensitive part of your penis is, you'd probably tell me at the bottom by the tip, that little vertical ridge. Well, that's where your foreskin was attached, and that is already the most sensitive part that's left, right?
And I heard the argument, by the way, that uncircumcised men, in fact, have better sexual relationships. Their sex is simply better.
I can tell you that there are a couple of studies underway right now, and there have been. AMA published a couple of studies trying to look at this, and indeed found numbers that went in that direction. If you talk to women who've had experience with both, and who are not biased, they will tell you the feel in their vagina is different. Men who have had both, i.e. a man, for instance, who's been circumcised as an adult, or men who have restored their foreskins, will tell you about a tremendous change in sensitivity. Some men are afraid it'll make them too sensitive, and they'll have
exactly. That problem happens to a lot of men, too.
Yes, it doesn't seem to. What happens is because of the increased sensitivity, you can be more subtle. Most guys watch porno, and they think that's the way women like to have sex, like a jackhammer. Turns out most women like something a little more subtle, but if a circumcised man, especially as he approaches middle age, goes for the subtle stuff, there almost is not enough stimulation to maintain their erections, and some men have a have a problem with it, but this is just fraught with difficulty. I think the point is that, you know, you and I both know this. You know, this is a major claim that the human body can be improved by, you know, taking an infant against its will, and this is, you know, it's a genital integrity issue. I mean, I think it's a human right. I mean, as an adult, you get a right to do what you want to. If men in Africa want to get circumcised, that's fine. But as an infant, I think we have to have major proof, you know, before we start.
Dean, let me ask you though, if I can, because I know, you know, you're Jewish, I'm Jewish, and I'm completely biased on this one, and I make no bones about it.
Yeah.
Having grown up in a culture that appreciates circumcision,
right.
I understand the significance of this.
Yeah.
But you know, outside of the religion, obviously, the argument you make is that circumcision simply should not exist. You know, does the religion have anything to do with your feelings? I mean, did you circumcise your boys?
You know, half of them, half aren't. I kind of, you know, caught it halfway. There are a lot of Jewish people who are not doing the full bris. And if you go back in the Bible and you go through history, you know, there were periods where just a cut was made, and during the Greek periods, that's kind of interesting. You know, I really want to be honest with myself about this. I'm supposed to be objective. I mean, my parents were initially aghast at the whole idea.
Yeah, how can you, no bris, what, you're nuts? By the way, I've talked to your mother, and I got to tell you, she thinks you're nuts, Dean.
I know that. She'll never tell me that, though. You know, I'll tell you something. How do I say this sensitively? You know, most of the avid circumcisers, even in medicine, and by the way, even in the African study, you know, are Jewish. It's kind of like talking to Catholics about birth control. The most avid circumcisers are.
Well, that makes sense.
And it does make sense. And you know, as Jews, we do have this fear. I mean, I heard this as a kid, and maybe today it's gone. But during World War II, you know, you got your drawers pulled down, and if you were circumcised, you were sent to a concentration camp. And we all have fear of that, which is why would Jews care whether non-Jews circumcised? Well, we kind of want to fit in.
Now, part of that is a psychological aspect. Everybody's circumcised.
Yes.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
It's not a Christian thing, certainly. You go in the Bible, Jesus was circumcised because he was a Jew.
Yeah.
You know, by the way, it's fabulous. I just have it on my desk called Marked in Your Flesh, Oxford University Press, and it really goes in. It's circumcision from ancient Judea to modern America, and the tradition of it is fascinating. And to go back to your point, just not to undermine it, because there may be some illnesses, but the same with women. I mean, I had an East African doctor tell me, why you have to circumcise women. They're cleaner. And you hear from women who have very little experience with foreskins in America. You go on the street and you ask women about it. Oh, no, that's disgusting. It's dirty. I say, well, you know, the moisture and the dirt in the woman never kept men away from it, you know. So, you know, that's a very offensive comment to be made. If men made that comment about women in the world, in the political climate today, can you imagine? And I just urge people to think about it.
One of the things about the South African study, incidentally, you know, cuts the transmission of AIDS. Do you buy that?
Well, we don't know until you do a proper control. Let's suppose it did. How can this possibly be a solution in a country where you'll never get men to line up and do this, and the ones who do already are going to be different and biased? How does it affect their future sexuality? Do they have more sex, less sex? You know, if this were a pharmaceutical drug, we would never let it on the market. But we've tried this in other countries, and it has not worked, and all the major, you know, international groups who've watched this study have not changed their mind about it. It's just not a solution in Africa. Problem.
Let's talk about America here. Has there been a sea change in the way circumcision was? I mean, when I was growing up, I was born in 1951. In the 50s, every kid was circumcised.
Absolutely.
Across the board. What is a stat now? Do you know?
It'd be important, because the excuse that you hear mostly from parents is they want the child to look like daddy.
Right.
You know, if daddy's bald, shave off his hair.
Exactly.
Which is very funny. But right now, in the western United States, the majority of little boys are not circumcised or left intact. So the locker room of the future, you circumcise your kid, he may be the one to be, quote, made fun of. In the East, it's getting to be about 50-50. So nationally, just in the last few years, we've shifted towards most boys being left intact.
Wow.
And you want to see, you know, the pleasures and joys and functioning of a foreskin. I think most men would drop their jaws and say, oh, my God, I want that.
All right, Dean, as always, thank you very much.